If you ever worked a government job, a teaching job, or any position where your paycheck did not have Social Security tax taken out of it, there is a real chance the government owes you money right now. Not a small adjustment. In some cases, thousands of dollars. And here's the part that should bother you: the Social Security Administration is not calling everyone who is owed this money. Some of it only shows up if you go looking for it yourself. This is not a scare tactic. This is a real law, it has a real name, and it went into full effect this year. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly what changed, who it affects, and the one group of people who are most likely to be missing money and don't even realize it. Stay with me, because the group most likely to be overlooked is probably not who you'd guess. Here's the short version of what happened. For over 40 years, if you worked a job that didn't pay into Social Security, like many teachers, firefighters, police officers, and postal workers, two rules could shrink your Social Security check. One was called the Windfall Elimination Provision. The other was called the government pension offset. Together, people just called them WEP and GPO. If you had a pension from a job outside the Social Security system, these rules assumed you didn't need your full Social Security benefit, so they cut it, sometimes by a little, sometimes by hundreds of dollars a month. For some spouses and widows, the cut was total. Their benefit went all the way down to zero. In January of 2025, Congress passed something called the Social Security Fairness Act, and it repealed both of those rules completely, not reduced, repealed, and through the first half of this year, the Social Security Administration has been catching up, sending out higher monthly checks and retroactive back pay to people affected by the old rules. If you or your spouse ever worked in public service, this is probably the single most important thing happening in Social Security this year, and it's worth taking 15 minutes to check your own account. Now, before we go further, if you find videos like this helpful, consider subscribing. Rules like this change more often than most people realize, and most channels don't explain them until months after they matter. Let's talk about who this actually affects, because it's a wider group than most people assume. It's not just teachers. It includes firefighters, police officers, many state and local government employees, and federal workers hired before 1984 under the old civil service retirement system. It also includes their husbands and wives. If your spouse earned a pension from one of those jobs and you were counting on a spousal or survivor benefit through their Social Security record, the old rules may have reduced or completely wiped out what you were owed. That's the part people miss. This law is not just for the retired teacher. It's for the retired teachers. Widow too. Let me walk through a couple of situations to show you how this plays out. These are illustrative examples, not real individuals, but they reflect the kind of story that fits the pattern reported around this change. Picture a retired school teacher in Ohio. She taught for close to 30 years, paid into a state teacher's pension the entire time, and never paid into Social Security through that job. Earlier in her career, before teaching, she had worked other jobs that did pay into Social Security, so she qualified for a small benefit on her own record. For years, that benefit was cut down because of her teacher's pension. Then, sometime after the new law passed, she noticed an unfamiliar deposit in her bank account, followed by a jump in her monthly benefit. That's the Windfall Elimination Provision repeal doing exactly what it was designed to do: her own benefit based on her own work finally being paid in full. Now picture a different situation. A retired police officer passes away. His wife never worked a public pension job herself, but she was entitled to a survivor's benefit based on his years of paying into Social Security before he became an officer. Except she also received a small pension of her own from years working for a local school district. Under the old government pension offset rule, that small pension was enough to reduce her survivor's benefit to nothing. She was told years ago not to bother filing because the offset would zero it out anyway, so she never filed at all. That's the group I want you to pay close attention to, because unlike the teacher in the first example, nobody is sending her an automatic deposit. There's no record for the Social Security Administration to update because she never had a claim on file to begin with. That second story is the one that matters most today, because here's where things get interesting. The Social Security Administration has been processing this rule change largely by updating existing records. If you already had a claim on file, even one paying you a reduced or $0 benefit, the system generally knows to look at it. But if you were told years ago that you wouldn't qualify for anything, and you took that advice and never filed, there is nothing in the system to trigger a review. You have to be the one who opens that file. This is where a lot of retirees, especially widows and widowers, are going to fall through the cracks, not because the government is hiding anything, but because filing paperwork you were once told was pointless is not something most people think to revisit. So how much money are we actually talking about? By the middle of 2025, the Social Security Administration had already sent more than 3 million payments, totaling roughly $17 billion, to people affected by this repeal. That's the retroactive piece, covering benefits going back to January of 2024. On top of that, monthly checks going forward are permanently higher for everyone in this group. For someone whose benefit had been cut by around $500 a month under the old rules, that can mean about $6,000 a year in retroactive back pay, plus a permanent increase of a similar amount going forward every year for the rest of their life, for a spouse whose survivor benefit had been reduced to nothing. The swing can be even larger, since they may be picking up a benefit that essentially didn't exist before. Here's something else almost nobody talks about. Some members of Congress have specifically raised concerns that not everyone is getting the full amount they're owed. A group of senators sent a letter to the Social Security Administration questioning whether some spouses were only receiving 6 months of retroactive pay instead of the full period the law allows. If you're in this group, that's worth knowing because it means the amount on your first deposit is not necessarily the final word. It's worth asking, not just accepting. Now, this rule change is the headline, but it's not the only thing shifting for retirees this year, and I don't want you to walk away thinking it's the only thing to check. Social Security benefits went up 2.8% starting in January, which works out to roughly $56 more a month for the average retiree. That sounds like good news, and it is, but here's the part that quietly eats into it. Medicare Part B premiums also went up this year, from around $185 a month to just under $202. For a lot of retirees, that increase alone cancels out a meaningful chunk of the cost of living raise. It's not a scandal. It's just something worth knowing so your budget doesn't get thrown off by a number you expected to be higher. If you're still working while collecting benefits, there's another number that changed. The earnings limit for people below full retirement age is now $24,480 a year. Earn more than that, and Social Security temporarily withholds $1 for every $2 over the limit. If you're turning your full retirement age sometime this year, that limit is more generous, sitting at $65,160. Here's what a lot of people misunderstand about this rule, and it trips people up every year. It is not a tax and it is not gone forever. It's a temporary withholding, once you hit full retirement age. Social Security recalculates your benefit to account for what was withheld, and your future checks go up to make up for it. It feels like a penalty in the moment, but it's really a delay. And one more date worth knowing, full retirement age is finally landing at 67 this year for anyone born in 1960 or later. That's been a slow climb since the 1980s, and this is the final step. If you're in that birth year and thinking about when to claim, that number matters for your math. But let's bring it back to the biggest one, because that's the change most likely to put real money in your pocket if you act on it. If any part of your working life or your spouse's working life involved a pension from a job that didn't pay into Social Security, here's what I want you to actually do this week. Log into your account at ssa.gov, the official Social Security website, and compare your current monthly benefit to what you were receiving before January of 2025. If you see it went up and you also received a lump sum deposit at some point, that's likely the retroactive payment working as intended. If the number hasn't moved at all, don't assume it means you're not eligible. Call the Social Security Administration directly and ask them to review your record under the Social Security Fairness Act. And if you're a widow, a widower, or a divorced spouse who was told years ago that a pension would zero out your survivor or spousal benefit, and you never filed because of it, this is your sign to file now. That advice may have been accurate under the old rules. It is very likely outdated under the new ones. Filing costs you nothing but a phone call or an online application, and the potential upside is real money you may have been owed for over a year already. Have you checked your account for this? Would you know if a retroactive payment had actually reached you or if you were one of the ones still waiting? Most people wouldn't, simply because nobody told them to look. Let's bring this together. The Social Security Fairness Act repealed two rules, the Windfall Elimination Provision and the government pension offset, that had been cutting benefits for public sector workers and their spouses for over 40 years. Millions of retirees have already received higher checks and retroactive back pay, but The people most likely to be missing money are the ones who never filed a claim in the first place because they were told years ago it wouldn't be worth it. On top of that, this year brought a 2.8% cost of living increase, a Medicare premium hike that eats into some of that gain, updated earnings limits for working retirees, and the final step in raising full retirement age to 67. None of this requires a lawyer or a financial advisor to sort out. It requires about 15 minutes logging into your Social Security account or one phone call if you think you might be one of the people who was told years ago not to bother. If you worked in public service, if your spouse did, or if you know someone who did, that 15 minutes could be worth thousands of dollars. If you know someone who spent their career as a teacher, a firefighter, a police officer, or in any government job, send them this video. And if you know a widow or widower who might have been told long ago that they didn't qualify for anything, send it to them especially. One phone call today could be the difference between money that's it's unclaimed and money that shows up in their account next month. Take care of yourselves, check your accounts, and I'll see you in the next one.